Here's a truly pop quiz to illustrate a key trend of recent years: the increasing inequality of income. Just one question: which of these three graphs best depicts the Oprah Winfrey supply curve? Designer of the quiz, Northwestern professor Robert Gordon.
Oh, this is really easy. In fact, you as a student are not going to fail this exam because the Oprah supply graph is a vertical line. There's one Oprah, and there it is. And the demand can go up, and then the demand goes down. Now, when Oprah decides to publish a magazine, in addition to doing the TV show, up goes the demand curve, crossing this supply curve, maybe at double the level, and so she makes twice as much money.
So the supply of Oprah is fixed, but the demand for Oprah can shift to the right if people want more Oprah.
It's a shift, and then people will eventually get tired of Oprah. Maybe her show will eventually get canceled. Her magazines won't sell any money. People are tired of seeing her on all 12 issues. Then the demand curve will come back down. And it's just like Rembrandt paintings. There are only a certain number of Rembrandt paintings. As our society gets richer, people can afford to pay more for Rembrandt paintings, and the price goes up. So we can tell a lot of stories with this simple idea of the vertical supply curve.
The main story Gordon wants to tell is why those with unique abilities, like Oprah's, or unique possessions, like Rembrandt's, will make dramatically more money if the demand for them grows. In fact, if the supply curve is perfectly inelastic, then price, here the income of Oprah, or what you get for Rembrandt's, will vary entirely on the basis of shifts in demand. And the richer an economy gets, all else equal, the more demand there will be for the work of Oprah or Rembrandt. Professor Gordon thinks the graph has one more thing to teach his students and us: that the government shouldn't be afraid to raise taxes on high-income earners like Oprah, at least at today's top marginal rates.
Oprah Winfrey is very good at what she does, and people pay to watch her, or they choose to watch her, and advertisers buy commercials on her program. And, you know, that's good. People like her. There shouldn't be a law against that. But then I do submit to my students that there's a very good reason for having a high income tax rate on people like Oprah and helping the poor people in society with some of the money we get out of her income.
Because it's not going to make Oprah work any less hard, you claim, if she gets a few less million.
It's the old economic principle that if something is inelastically supplied, which means there's only one Oprah, and you put a high tax on Oprah, do you think she's going to quit doing her program? Do you think she's going to stop publishing that magazine with every single one of the 12 issues has Oprah on the cover? Is she going to stop all that stuff just because you raise the income tax rate from 39% to 50%? Of course not.
But here's a second question for Professor Gordon. Suppose you raise the tax rate well above today's rate. Not to 50%, say, but to above 90%, the rate that President Franklin Roosevelt established during World War II and that lasted into the 1960s. That would change the supply curve for labor, says another distinguished member of the economics profession, Dan Hammermesh of the University of Texas.
I'm convinced that almost all supply curves involving people, there is some price at which people will do it, and there is some other price at which they will stop doing it. For example, it's not like something which has been made in the past which no longer can be manufactured, like Rembrandt paintings. Rembrandt's not doing anymore, nor is Renoir, for example. But for example, take I call him my doppelganger, Mick Jagger. My double, okay? Mick is exactly my age. He was an economics major in college. Now, Mick is probably making $100 million a year off his services, which he well deserves. And the question is, would Mick ever stop doing what he does? And I think if we said to Mick, or to any rock singer, we will tax away all but $20,000 of your rock earnings, Mick, if he's smart, would switch to doing something else. Like if he could only make $20,000 as a rock singer, I'm quite convinced that Mick would be an economist. In other words, there is some price of his services which is so low that he would get out of the business of offering his services. It's far below his current income, but there is some price at which he would stop doing it. So even somebody like Mick Jagger, who you think does it for the pleasure, money doesn't matter, I'm absolutely convinced that he would get out of the business if things got bad enough.
So the supply of living legends like Oprah or Mick is inelastic in a certain range, elastic in the extreme. By contrast, says Nobel laureate Gary Becker, most people's labor is quite price elastic and therefore quite responsive to tax hikes.
And if you tell them you'll get the same income, more or less, regardless of what you do, then 2,000 years of history, whatever it may be, tells us people aren't going to work as hard. They're not going to do as much.
Have you actually ever done anything strictly in response to tax considerations?
Sure, many things I do. And let me give you an example. Somebody calls me up and says, I have to travel to Mexico and they're going to give me an honorarium. I don't particularly want to go to Mexico, okay? I calculate our government's going to be my partner. It's going to take roughly 40% of that in my bracket. And that makes a big difference to me. And no question, I would be doing certain things that I wouldn't be doing otherwise. So yes, it definitely has affected me. I like my job. I like the work I'm doing. If I got paid much less, I'd still be a professor and do research. But it doesn't mean it doesn't have significant effects on my behavior at the same time. I think it does.
Moreover, economists like Gary Becker think taxes have significant effects on almost everyone's behavior. But of course, Professor Gordon's original question is about the super rich. How elastic is Oprah's price elasticity of supply? So suppose you were a gazillionaire celebrity and your tax rate increased from 40 to 50%. Would you produce less? In other words, how would your supply curve be drawn?